This is Nehemiah chapter 8. So if you, which one has it? See that Tanakh? It says Tanakh there. It's in between Chumashim to your left a little bit, to your left a little bit, to your left. And then it's like sort of in there. There's two Chumashim and then there's one in the middle that says Tanakh.
It's right in front of my face.
It is right there, yeah.
Of course, I can't see anything anymore. All
so
right.
in there is the book of Nehemiah. So it's going to be towards the end.
Okay. I'll find it.
Okay. So it's going to be after the book of Ezra. So it's like after Esther. It's in the writing section. So it's really towards the end, but not the end, but towards the end.
Now, which one is it?
It's Nehemiah.
Okay, I'm there.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8.
You know, it's funny. There's this book, I think it's called The Book of Eli. There's this movie,
Yeah.
It's called The Book of Eli. Denzel Washington was in it. He plays this blind person in a post-apocalyptic, like America. You don't know I've already ruined it. You don't know he's blind for much of the movie.
Right. I've heard of
Remember,
it, so I knew you didn't ruin it because I already
Okay.
knew that he was
Right.
blind.
So anyways, he is trying to get somewhere and he has this text that he's trying to bring. There's a library they're putting together somewhere, which is going to be the great works of civilizations. So they preserve the wisdom of all the civilizations up until then. And then it ends up that it's a Bible. I think it's a Bible in Braille, but it's a Bible. The idea is that it's a Bible. So he's tasked with preserving the Bible. And so he goes through all this stuff and it finally gets to this library and you see them put it on the library shelf. And so you have the Bible and right on the library shelf is that Tanakh. That exact one, the Art Scroll Tanakh that you're holding. Not that was the one from the movie, but that it looked like it in the bookcase right there. And it was just hysterical to me because he was doing all this to preserve the Bible, and the whole time they had a Tanakh. Now, of course, they're probably also trying to preserve the New Testament, but that's not what they were quoting the whole time. They were quoting, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." It had all this. It was all Genesis stuff that they were quoting. And he had risked his whole life, to bring it there. And then right next to it is an Art Scroll Tanakh. It's quite humorous. Okay.
Yes.
So this is at the beginning of the Second Commonwealth. They are setting things up, building the Second Temple, setting up their society for success. There was a lot of work, both physically building up the city and the Beit HaMikdash, and sociologically with the people that were there, because they were people who were not learned and had intermarried. There was all sorts of stuff going on there. And so there was a lot of early work to try to get the society back to where it needs to be in order to be a productive Jewish society for this, what's called the Second Commonwealth of the Jewish people. So both the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah deal with this time. Originally, it was one book. It was just called the book of Ezra. At some point, it got separated into Ezra and Nehemiah. They're there at the same time. They're working together. They had different roles. Ezra is the religious leader of the people. He's going to put together the men of the Great Assembly. He is ensuring the continuity of the oral law. And he's going to begin a regime in the land of Israel that is functioning with a lot of the tools that the Jewish people had from the beginning, but not all of them. There aren't going to be prophets anymore. There aren't going to be kings, or at least in his vision of it, there aren't going to be kings anymore. Those were two important executive positions in the Jewish people, and but there's gonna be a kind of robust rabbinic leadership. There is a secular leadership, which is like a king, but they're going to be called the heads of the exile, not kings. Eventually, not the heads of the exile. They're going to be eventually called Nasi, the person who's the head of the people. There are kings during the Second Temple. After the Hanukkah revolution, there are kings, but it doesn't look like that had been the original intent. And according to commentaries, this was a terrible mistake that they did this, especially they did it from amongst the Kohanim, who were not supposed to be the kings. So it was ill-fated and not destined to last very long. But it seems like that was the setup. So again, there were elements of the first Beit HaMikdash that are not present in the second. The most prominent is there is no Ark of the Covenant. There's no Aron HaKodesh in the second Beit HaMikdash. There's a Holy of Holies, but there's no Ark of the Covenant in there. It had been hidden while there still was the first Beit HaMikdash, and they did not have it during the second Beit HaMikdash. There were other elements of the first Beit HaMikdash that were not the same in the second Beit HaMikdash, but in form, it was very close to what had been there before. And so they're setting this whole thing up. And whenever we talk about the book of Nehemiah, I highlight that it's very readable. The one part that you can get sort of weighted down with are the names. He mentions lots of names.
Yes.
But but besides the names, if you read it, it reads very much like a diary. And it, depending on the translation you have, some are more readable than others, but even the ones that aren't as readable, you can tell it has the tone of a diary, and it is like you're getting a person's personal report on what's going on during that time. It's pretty cool. There is, I seem to remember from like a sort of popular history reading, that they have papyrus messages from Nehemiah to troops that were in Africa. So he is one of these figures where you have some relics of the time besides his book, but some like outside kind of, I don't know where these are, but I read once that they exist, some kind of papyrus missives from Nehemiah to troops that were along the Nile somewhere in Africa. Okay, so the entire people assembled as one man in the square before the Watergate.
That's where it comes from.
And they asked Ezra the scribe to bring the scroll of the teaching of Moses with which the Lord had charged Israel on the first day of the 7th month. So even at this point, they do not call it Rosh Hashanah.
No.
They do not yet call it Rosh Hashanah, but they call it the first day of the 7th month, which is Rosh Hashanah. Ezra the priest brought the teaching before the congregation, men and women, and all who could listen with understanding. He read from it facing the square before the Watergate from the first light until midday. To the men and the women and those who could understand, the ears of all the people were given to the scroll of teaching. Now, our assumption is that at this point, which is about 350 years before the Common Era, they did not have the scripted prayer service that we have. At this point, they don't even have any version of the Amidah. There is I think the Gemara suggests that the men of the Great Assembly did compose the Amidah. So there was some early version of the Amidah that existed from the time of the men of the Great Assembly, but this would be before, because this is maybe just a couple years before, but this would be before that. So there isn't, when the people are gathering, they're not gathering for prayer like we do. They're gathering for the Torah reading. In other words, they had something that was like a synagogue service, but what was like a synagogue service was that the Torah was read. And so he reads from the Torah from first light until noon. To the men and the women and those who could understand, the ears of all the people were given to the scroll of the teaching. Ezra the scribe stood upon a wooden tower made for this purpose. Beside him stood Mattisyahu, Shema, Ananiah, Uriah, Hilkiah, Masya, at his right and his left, Pedaiah, Michael, Malchiah, Hashum, Hashbadana, Zechariah, and Meshullam. And then Ezra opened the scroll in the sight of the people, for he was above all the people as he opened it, and all the people stood up. So it sounds like they were sitting.
Well, see, it's not translated that way here.
How do you have it?
All the people stood silent. But that doesn't necessarily mean they were standing.
Right.
They just became silent.
Right. So the question would be, were they standing the whole time?
Right.
Or did they stand at that moment?
Exactly. Okay.
All right. Vayivorech. So, and then Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all the people answered, Amen and Amen. Again, when we read from the Torah, we do something similar. There's a blessing before the Torah is read with their hands upraised. Then they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves before the Lord God with their faces to the ground. So when they prayed, this is something Ramosha Shapiro emphasized. When they prayed, they raised their hands above their head, like this.
Yeah, like they were reaching up to God.
Right, like you're reaching up, hands held up.
Right.
That's how they prayed. He suggested that when Moshe had his hands raised like that at the Battle of Amalek, that was a gesture of prayer, because that's how we prayed. At some point, we stopped doing that for whatever reason.
We got too old; we couldn't hold our hands.
No, but even young people, we don't pray like that anymore. No, and it could have something to do with the fact that other people started to pray that way. But that's how we used to praise. So it says, B'mal Yedayim, in other words, that's a gesture of prayer. So they would pray they prayed with their, or bless, made blessings or whatever, and prayed with their hands held high, and then they bowed down. We also do not do this anymore. Even on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where there's a custom to go down on your knees and bow, that's not this. This is, you're completely flat. You're completely flat. There's no bending on the knees. Your stomach is on the ground on this kind of a bow, vayishtachavu, and you bow with your face to the ground. So we do neither of those anymore. And again, there's discussion about that, why we don't, but we don't. And then you have some more people: Yeshua, Bani, Shravya, Yamin, Akuv, Shabtai, Hodaya, Masaya, Klita, Azariah, Yosavad, Hanan, Playa, and the Levites explained the teaching to the people while the people stood in their places. So while he's reading, there are people scattered amongst the crowd, and they're explaining whatever the people don't understand. They read from the scroll of the teaching of God, translating it and giving the sense so they understood the reading. So it sounds like they didn't just translate it, but they're also explaining. So you imagine that Ezra read a verse and gave them time to talk to the people, read a verse, gave them time to talk to the people, read a verse, gave them time to talk to the people. There was an ancient custom to read the Torah like this, that the Torah reader would read a verse and then somebody would translate it in Aramaic for the people in general. There are still Yemenites who do this.
There's still shoals that do that, where whoever is reading, well, not while they're reading.
This is while they're reading.
Yeah, but at the end, they'll go through it and explain it.
Right. This is while he's reading. This is the guy is leaning. And so he'll read, and then somebody will translate into Aramaic, and then he continues, and then it's translated, continues, and translated. So that's most likely what's taking so long. If you ask yourself, what could he possibly be reading that takes from the morning till noon? So this is what's happening. He's reading, and then there's people out there amongst the crowd who are not just translating, but sort of explaining the intent. Now, whether or not they all got together beforehand to agree on the explanations that they were giving or not. Also, if you notice, the tribe that is associated with this are the tribe of Levi. And this is something that the Rambam emphasizes when he's talking about the tribe of Levi. We talked about this in detail when this stuff came up in the various Torah portions that focused on the tribe of Levi, like we had some in Bamidbar, we had some in various parashas, including
all of them.
We definitely had in Korach, but we had before Korach, where it might have been Naso in the Torah portion of Naso. It could have been in Bamidbar, but I don't think so. I think it was in Naso, maybe Baaloscha, in that area. We were talking about it, and then maybe even the end of Vayikra and Bahar and Buku Kosai. And then in Korach, we were talking about it. But it was this question about, initially, it sounds like the tribe of Levi is going to be what the Kohanim are. That when they're initially set up, it sounds like they're going to be like what the Kohanim are. But then when the Kohanim are introduced, they really get the service in the Beit HaMikdash, and the Leviim end up being guards. They end up being the symphony and the choir, but they don't do service. They don't bring a korban, they don't clean up, they don't set up the menorah, they don't do any service related stuff. That ends up being the Kohanim. And I was suggesting that this is part of why Korach is so upset. It's not just that Aaron was named the Kohen Gadol, but this whole institution of Kohanim guts what appeared to be the august position of the Levim. While they're in the desert, they're very much responsible for moving the Mishkan and etc. But even that, they're not in charge. There are Kohanim that oversee it. But when the Rambam writes about the tribe of Levi, he writes that they are going to be responsible to educate the nation because they are, in a sense, a leisurely class. They are a leisurely class in the sense that they do not work the land. They are given a stipend, a government stipend. In this case, the tithes, and so they are supported without having to work the land, which gives them time for scholarship. So they are going to become the scholars. They are going to populate the Sanhedrin. A lot of the Sanhedrin are going to be from the tribe of Levi. But also they are going to be the primary teachers and educators for the nation. So you see a little bit of that here. They are, as far as the tribe, they are identified as the ones who explain the teaching to the people while the people stood in their places.
Rabbi Karsh, do
Yeah.
we know where Purim is situated vis-a-vis in relation to this? Because it says Nehemiah was in Shushan, and then he goes to Jerusalem. And then in the next line after what you read, he actually has a Persian name, or I mean, it looks like, it says,
He is it seems like from the beginning of the book that he is high up in the Persian army under Darius II. Now, according to the Gemara, this Darius is the son of Esther and Achashverosh.
So this is after the Esther story. Okay.
It's but not long after.
Right.
I don't know what, I only have the Gemara for this, and the Gemara is not always interested in being a history book, but according to the Gemara, but he is identified as a high up in the army of Darius, and he's the one who he approaches Darius to get permission to lead a delegation to Israel with the support of Darius and set up the defenses for the people of Israel. So what happened is they get permission to go, but they are besieged by sort of enemies from without. All these people were getting along fine without Jews being there, and suddenly all these Jews are coming back. So they are pockets of resistance, and so when people are trying to build the Beit HaMikdash, they're being shot with arrows and stuff like that. So Nehemiah goes and he sets up a defensive perimeter, and he allows for eventually he's going to create like a Jewish army there. But he does it with Darius's permission. And again, this is supposed to be Darius II, right, which again, according to the Gemara, he is the son of Darius II, of Achashverosh and Esther, which would mean that this is a few years after Purim.
Yeah, and look what it says a few lines later. Go eat rich foods and drink sweet beverages and
Right,
send
this is
portions
Rosh
to
Hashanah.
those who
I
have
know.
not.
Nice, nice. Because this is what you did on a holiday. This is what you did on a holiday. And Purim was made into a holiday. These were
Yeah.
the elements that you do in a holiday. Exactly. Yeah, nice. So so they're reading and they're translating it and teaching it. And then Nehemiah, the Tirshata, Ezra the priest and the scribe, and the Levites who were explained to the people, said to the people, this day is a holy day to the Lord your God. You must not mourn or weep. So again, this is for, if you're looking for what the character of Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be, Rosh Hashanah is not supposed to be a day of mourning or weeping. So you assume that he's been reading harsh rebuke to them from the Torah. That's what you assume, which would lead the people to mourn and weep. But they're saying that's not what this is about today. For all the people were weeping as they listened to the words of the teachings. He further said to them, go eat choice foods, drink sweet drinks, send portions to whoever has nothing prepared, for the day is holy to our Lord. Do not be sad, for your rejoicing in the Lord is the source of your strength. So that word chedva is a word that is sometimes translated as happiness. And this is one of those touch points on this theme, that the general character of our service of God is supposed to be with happiness. And certainly on a holiday. He further said, okay, so that's Rosh Hashanah. The Levites were quieting the people, saying, hush, for the day is holy, do not be sad. Then all the people went to eat and drink and send portions and make great merriment, for they understood the things they were told. Okay, now that's Rosh Hashanah. At that time, Rosh Hashanah was a one-day holiday. It became a two-day holiday later on, but it is not yet. So what did they do on the second day? On the second day, the heads of the clans of all the people and the priests and Levites gathered to Ezra the scribe to study the words of the teaching. They found written a teaching that the Lord had commanded Moses and the Israelites must dwell in booths during the festival of the seventh month.
Okay, so we now have Rosh Hashanah, we have Sukkot.
So what don't we have?
We don't have Yom Kippur.
So that's why I'm saying this is about Yom Kippur. It's about Yom Kippur because it doesn't mention Yom Kippur.
Okay.
The dog that didn't bark. Okay.
It is the dog that didn't bark.
Yeah,
it is the underlying principle of the Museum of Things you would expect to find in the Torah, but do not. This is not in the 5 books, but the same principle is at work here. The fact that Yom Kippur is not mentioned is extremely puzzling. And so it says, they found written in the teaching of the Lord and commanded Moses that the Israelites must dwell in booths during the festival of the 7th month. They must announce and proclaim throughout all their towns and Jerusalem as follows. Go out to the mountains, bring leafy branches of olive trees, pine trees, myrtles, palm trees, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written. Now they're not talking about bringing the 4 species. They're talking about using these elements to make the sukkah. So the people went out and brought them and made themselves booths on their roofs and in their courtyards, in the courtyards of the house of God, in the square of the water gate, and in the square of the Ephraim gate. And the whole community returned from the captivity, made booths, and dwelt in the booths. The Israelites had not done so from the days of Joshua, son of Nun, to this day, and there was very great rejoicing. So there are a lot of these verses in Tanakh. They require explanation. If you look at a lot of them, it means that this was that kind of excitement. Why do they, in other words, the same kind of excitement as they had when they first started doing it in the land of Israel? Now, why don't they mention since the time of Moshe? Why do they mention since the time of Yoshua ben Nun? If you accept that what this means is obviously they had sukkahs throughout the first Commonwealth, and even before. So let's say you were reading it this way. This is how many commentaries read this. Obviously, they did have sukkahs, but they didn't have one with this kind of joy since that time. So there's a couple ways of understanding this. Again, but let's say that's the way. Why is the first time they're doing it? Let's say it's in the time of Joshua, that's the first time they're doing it. Why is the time of Joshua the first time of doing it? Why aren't they doing it with Moshe in the desert? So it's very possible they did not. That the whole time they were in the desert, they did not have sukkahs, even though the command is given while they're in the desert.
But while they were in the desert, they were dwelling in.
Right. That's another clue to the fact that they didn't do it while they were in the desert. They because the explanation for doing it is that we're going to do it to remember how we lived in the desert. But it's very possible they did not do Sukkot or the holiday of Shavuos while they were in the desert. They do Pesach. We know they do Pesach, but we don't know if they did Pesach every year. We know they did Pesach the first 2 years because the Torah says they did. Did they do Pesach from the time of the spies until they went into Israel? So there's discussion about that as well. But it's very possible they didn't do Sukkot until, very likely, they didn't celebrate Sukkot until they were already in Israel. They had conquered it. And so when would they have had the first holidays of Sukkot? They would have had that in the time of Joshua. Now, this is being compared to that time because this is that same kind of heady time. It's like you're restarting, you're re-beginning life as a Jewish people in Israel. And so you'd look back to the time of Joshua when the new state of Israel was just beginning. They looked back to this time, the time of Nehemiah. They look back to this time for models for the new state of Israel, because this is the first time that they get a chance to start up since the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. So, for instance, Ezra formed the men of the Great Assembly. It's called the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. So Israel's governing body is called the Knesset, after the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. The Anshe Knesset Hagdolah had 120 members. The Knesset has 120 members. They're modeling themselves after that because that's how many of them saw it. They saw the time of Ezra and Nehemiah as the time most similar to what they were going through in 1948 as they're trying to set up institutions now. So they were looking back and drawing from that. And that would make sense that in the time of Nehemiah, they would be looking back to Joshua, to the settling of the land under Joshua as a time to draw upon. They could have drawn upon David and Solomon, who are building the Beit HaMikdash and building up Jerusalem and the Beit HaMikdash. That would have been an option, but they're going back to the times of Joshua when the first Sukkot would have been. And he read from the scroll of the teaching of God each day, from the first to the last day. Again, when they gathered for the Torah reading, and you have to assume, you don't have to, but I'm suggesting you assume that when they talk about Torah reading, they're talking about what happened before, that he would read from it. There would be people interpreting, explaining to the people gathered, what it meant, etc. So it would be a kind of learning experience. And they did that throughout Sukkot. They celebrated 7 days, and there was a solemn gathering on the 8th as prescribed.
Then you go to the 24th day. And that sounds almost like it could have been Yom Kippur.
Okay, let's look at that. And then on the 24th day of that month, the Israelites assembled, fasting in sackcloth with earth upon them. Those of the stock of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners and stood and confessed their sins and iniquities of their fathers. Standing in their places, they read from the scroll of the teaching of the Lord their God for 1/4 of the day, and for another 1/4 they confessed and prostrated themselves before the Lord their God. On the raised platform of the Levites stood Yeshua and Bani, Kadmiel, Shvanya, the son of Buni, Shravya, Bani, and Kanani, and they cried out loud in a voice to the Lord their God. Levites Joshua, Kadmi, Beni, Hashbana, Shravya, Hodiah, Shravya, Pravya said, "Rise, bless the Lord your God, who is from eternity to eternity. May your glorious name be blessed, exalted, though it is above every blessing and praise." All right, I'm going to just mention to you right now that up until you asked me to look at this next thing, I had not thought of this as Yom Kippur. But the language...
Well, it's not exact.
No, but the language is so strong.
Yeah.
Especially the language of confession, and also Baruch Shem Kavod. On Yom Kippur, we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. We say it out loud. We don't whisper it. Oh man, it was right there. This is an unfortunate experience. It happens to me so often that something's right there and I don't see it. So we're going to make this a 2-part thing, and I'm very grateful to Liz for this. We're going to make it a 2-part thing. Why is Yom Kippur missing in the part between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot? And is this day a Yom Kippur-like day?
Sure seems like it. Good
Yeah.
going, Liz. That was, yeah.
The typical explanation, when I say typical, the most mentioned explanation for why Yom Kippur is not mentioned in this is because at that time, Yom Kippur was primarily experienced in the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, it's not, and this is part of what I wanted to think about, which is how has the fact that the Beis HaMikdash has been replaced by the synagogue changed how we experience holidays? And I was thinking of Yom Kippur as an example. During the time of the Beis HaMikdash, it seems like, let's say according to the answer that's generally given about why it's not mentioned here, which is that Nehemiah is focused on the experience of the people. In the book of Ezra, it talks about what was going on in the Beis HaMikdash. In Nehemiah, it doesn't mention the Beis HaMikdash. He's not talking about it. He's talking about the experience of the people. So these are holidays that, in other words, this is how Rosh Hashanah was experienced by the people. In the Beis Hamikdash, there's offerings, there's other things going on, and certainly Yom Kippur, which is very Beis Hamikdash centric, it's primarily happening in there. So they suggest that Nehemiah is talking about the experience of the people, since the people are not the main activity of Yom Kippur is happening in the Beis Hamikdash. The people are still fasting, but that's about it. They're not there. There's not a lot else going on for the people on Yom Kippur, whereas Sukkot is something that is very much, since you have the Sukkah, it's going to be very much a community celebration, something happening within the people, so therefore it needs to be focused on. That's still not completely satisfying, because look how much time they took with Rosh Hashanah and making sure that Rosh Hashanah was a special day, and so they
But
could
no
have,
chauffeur.
right.
Yeah, no chauffeur.
Right, and there's no chauffeur. That's also a big issue here. Why is there no chauffeur? Why is there no chauffeur? Yeah, so but for me, what I had been thinking about before, when I was thinking of choosing to learn this, was how once the synagogue becomes this central gathering place for prayer, holidays take on a different feel, a different structure, because a lot of it's happening in the synagogue where it wouldn't have been happening that way there.
It was still communal.
Right. And they did have the Torah reading, and they did make the Torah reading a factor in gathering. But like the experience we have where you're sitting with a chazan and you're going through a machzor, that would not have been how they were doing it. But there is Torah reading, there is a sense of study and explanation and stuff going on amongst the people. There is.
And then I wonder, after the second temple was completed, did they try to go back? Did it really work to go back? And then Hanukkah comes along. It's wow. Just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have tons of information. We do know they continue to have the Torah reading as part of ceremony, a part of the holidays, etc. But exactly how that worked without a synagogue-centric experience. So the fact that Yom Kippur not, according to these commentaries, Yom Kippur is not even mentioned because of that, suggests that almost everything about Yom Kippur was happening in the Beis Hamikdash. And for the average person outside, at least according to those commentaries, for the average person outside, Yom Kippur wasn't the focus that it is now. But then you have this day after Sukkot, which just looks
And it seems
so
to be
much
a
like Yom
long
Kippur.
time. It seems to be a long time, because here it says Sukkot for 7 days, and then the one day that sounded like Rosh Hashanah, that's 8 days, and now they're talking the 24th day.
No, the Rosh Hashanah was the 8th day of the month. Sukkot is going to be
I see.
6 days after
I got
that,
it.
and then this
It's
would
dates,
be
not
right
days.
after Sukkot. This would be like a day after Sukkot, because Sukkot would have ended on the 23rd, because it's 8 days,
Right.
starting on the 15th.
would
Yeah.
this be like Hoshana Rabbah. I mean,
No, it's even after Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the 7th day of Sukkot. And then there's Shmini Atzeres is the 8th day. And this would have been the day after. Yeah, so this is, if they wanted to do this, why didn't they do it on Yom Kippur? I mean, even according to those other explanations, that Yom Kippur is really mostly happening in the Beis Hamikdash, this would have been what they should have done on Yom Kippur. Why didn't they do this on Yom Kippur?
Maybe they thought Yom Kippur was after Sukkot.
No, I mean that wouldn't work well.
No,
because it's clear in the Torah when Yom Kippur is happening. It's yeah. Rosh Hashanah doesn't get a lot of specific mention about the nature of the day, but Yom Kippur does. Of all, Yom Kippur gets a lot of explanation. It's very clear. It's not clear. Does it start on the 9th? Does it start on the 10th? But it's one of those days, and it's clear from the Torah when that starts. So not only do you not have Yom Kippur mentioned, but then you have this day that's like Yom Kippur and should have been Yom Kippur, but it's happening on the 24th. So what do you do about that? What do you do about that? I like it. All right. Our mystery deepens, Watson.
yes. We had a shocking incident. Someone committed suicide in our building yesterday.
Is that
Just-
what it was?
No, well, partly maybe, I don't know. But in the other building, the east building, a man who I do not know jumped from the 6th floor.
Like,
Oh, I'm
Right.
very
Yeah. Now, my brother, when I told him, he said, how do you know it was suicide? I think we have to call in Colombo. But and I'm sorry.
Your brother is so outdated. To say calling Colombo, it's so obvious who needs to be called in. The
Who?
murders and
murders in the building?
yeah, Steve Martin,
Yeah.
Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez need to be brought in, especially because your
It was in
building
the building.
has 2 wings, and their building had the latest season. We shouldn't make light of it, though. I'm very sorry.
I know.
I'm very sorry, but
yeah,
once we have acknowledged that it's a sorry thing, I think you should tell your brother to get a Hulu subscription and watch Murders in the Building,
No.
because
We
he
still
should not be
watch
referencing Columbo.
we still watch Colombo.
I just watched Perry Mason the other night.
Me too.
Still watch Perry Mason.
Yeah, every once in a
Oh
while.
my
too.
gosh.
The old Perry Mason, the new one's terrible. But yeah.
No. Yeah, I couldn't watch. I
Is there a
tried
new
watching.
one?
Yeah, I watched one season of it. I couldn't watch more of it.
Right.
But
It's-
he's starting as a private detective before he makes it.
yeah.
And it's whatever.
I said, no, I can't
But
watch
Della Street, is it Della Street?
that.
yeah. She's
And
Yeah.
she's a lesbian in the new one. And yeah.
right. And the old one, Della Street, you're always suspecting that. Did they ever discuss
No.
possibly being
No, I don't think
Colombo?
so.
And then there's Paul Drake.
Drake, who is black in the new one. That's
And they're
fine.
always, everything is done perfectly, and just I love those. I love them. There's this thing called did I watch it? I had to watch it on one that has advertising though.
Oh,
Maybe it is. I need to recheck that to see if it's on any of the ones that don't have advertising. But I watched it on one of the ones that have advertising, but it's still okay. Yeah, Perry Mason and Columbo. I've in the past 2 months I've watched at least 2 episodes of Columbo, and one.
yes.
so Lois,
but only Murders in the Building.
yes.
Never
the
never
one-
saw it. but
Oh,
yeah.
it's exactly this thing.
I watched the first
This is
season.
exactly it. You have to watch
Yes.
it.
At least watch one.
No,
Um,
I think for your
the first
own
two
well-being in
seasons-
your building, you need to watch this.
Well, yeah, that too. But the first two
Well,
seasons were better than this one.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
we'll see how it's going. But yeah, even just if you watch the first season, it's gonna be.
All right. Well, Sonny remarked yesterday that our building is changing. There was an altercation, not with him, with another doorman, with one of the tenants who wouldn't get out of the pool when they were told to. And I don't know, because inclement weather was coming.
Yeah.
Things are exploding all over the world. Okay.
Okay, so what is a garage fire door?
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't ever find that out?
It's kind of it's the regular door, except that it isn't going up and down, and
So the backup system for the door.
yeah, it's like that, which the regular door is a fire door in a way,
Right.
So garage
Once
door.
again, I don't want to. I know we got distracted twice about it, but it's very sad that a person
Yeah,
died.
it is.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Anyway, Rabbi, I'm so
yeah.
glad you did this today, because it brought me back into the Torah instead of reading the Free Press, Barry Weiss and Todd Nahisi.
We're Nehemiah, and now we have our own mystery.
Yes.
We have
Okay.
our Yom Kippur mystery.
About
All
Yom Kippur. Yes. Okay.
right. Be
Thank
well.
you. And
Thank you so
right.
much,
Okay.
Rabbi. Thank you.